I traveled abroad for the first time this past summer, in the middle of June, and I went to Ireland, Galway, Ireland, which is on the west coast, and then Paris, France. And I decided to go to those countries because it wasn't really my choice, and I was along for the ride. My parents have a good friend who is an advisor at Georgia Tech University, and he goes overseas every summer for the past like 4 or 5 summers to be an advisor for students who are studying abroad with Virginia Tech. And so I went with my parents because they allowed me to go, which I originally was not supposed to. And my mom, so that's why I went to Ireland. And my mom chose Paris for a trip over the weekend for the 2 weeks we were in Ireland, because it's a well-known place that neither of them had ever been before. So that's why they decided to go there, and I was not complaining because it was free for me. And then when we were in Galway, we went to the Galway History Museum. We also went down one day to Ennismore, which is one of the 3 Aran islands that are off the coast of Ireland. And it's the home of the Gaelic language and the Gaelic people, and there's about 800 people who live on the biggest island, which is one we went to. And so we went on a tour with that so we could make the most of our day. And so we were with a native who grew up on the island and no longer lives on the island but does tours of the island. So we saw the seashore and some seals, because there's very large seal colonies there. And we also saw the 7 churches, which are ruins of 7 churches on the island, as well as a fort on the island where we got to see some beautiful cliffs.
I was, maybe I'll start with my undergraduate degree, which is in Mediterranean archaeology, and that was something that always stuck with me, but I didn't go directly into graduate school, so I wanted to take some time to work my way back in. So my first trip abroad was to Italy, and I worked on an archaeological project in Pompeii, and that was wonderful. And then I finally got myself into a graduate program, and that's when I started to study Greek archaeology, and that's when I started going to Greece, and that began in the summer of 2007, and I've been there every summer since. I spent 2 years actually at the American School of Classical Studies in Greece, and yeah, that's about one of my favorite places to be. So.
And the most recent one to Peru was an REI trek that we're real outdoorsy people. We like hiking, we love mountains, and REI happened to be running a new experimental route in Machu Picchu. They have about 4 or 5 programs in Machu Picchu that range from say 7 to 10 days. They're pretty expensive. The longer ones are more expensive, but they involve more time on the site of Machu Picchu. And what I did not want was the typical kind of tourist jaunt where they drop you off for a couple of hours and a guide tows you around and shows you this, that, and the other. I wanted to have at least 2 full days on Machu Picchu, so we signed up for that one, plus it was on sale. And it involved, it's a level 4 trek. They have 1 through 5 treks, and so 4 is considered strenuous. And so we thought, well, we can probably handle that. And it came close to being almost too much for us for our age because of the altitude, but we still had a wonderful time. It was the Lares Valley Machu Picchu Inca Trail REI trek. There were only 7 of us, which was wonderful, plus a guide, an assistant guide, and a local Quechuan, that's the name of the local people, indigenous people who eventually became the Incas, a local Quechuan, probably farmer with a couple of donkeys.
The first time I traveled abroad was when I was a junior in college, and I went on a summer study program. We were in Paris for a month, and that's where I picked up this little watercolor. It's in a part of Paris which is called Montmartre, at the top of a hill. So you have a white basilica, which you see in the picture here. And this is just a pretty typical scene from that area. So I spent several weeks in Paris and then traveled around France, and that really gave me just a kind of hint of what was to follow. So after I finished my degree, I applied and got a Fulbright to study and teach in France for a year, and that really changed my life. I was able to live with my pen pal's family, a family that didn't speak any English at all, and so my French got much better, and I lived not as a tourist and not as a student, but as a government employee. So I taught at a public school, I benefited from Social Security, and I lived like the French lived. So that was a wonderful experience. After that, I really decided that my career would be in French teaching.
It satisfies something in me. Most of my adult life I've spent being a nomad, so just being on the move and trying to travel around, it kind of fits with the rest of my life. So that's one of the things. And a lot of practical experiences, just learning how to travel light and learning, where to go, and if things aren't going well, knowing how to get help and where to go and who to contact. So yeah, so it's a lot of little practical things. It's about experience that you have to get out there and just do it and just figure it out for yourself.
I don't know if it's like fully changed as a person. It made me want to go elsewhere, so that's one thing. It did make me want to keep traveling. It's interesting I feel like America is very isolated because we are a big nation where, we don't have very many people around us. We have Mexico below us, we have Canada above us, and we're not like Europe where you have all of these small little countries around you and you can easily get around. I mean, you can easily get from state to state, but, going to South Carolina is not changing me culturally in any way. Well, it kind of, but not for the better, let's say. So I would say that it changes you just to go somewhere else and see that there are other people who have customs that are not like you, who don't speak like you, who don't speak the same language as you, who don't look like you. And I mean, I went to a place that's predominantly white, so even like the people still kind of pretty much look like me, but seeing just that those differences it's kind of eye-opening that people out there are, not living in America. They're living elsewhere. And I went to places that are developed. I didn't even go to places that, are low-income countries where things are extremely different. And I can't even imagine, like, how much different it would be to go to a place that's completely different from your culture and be able to see how those changes, see how they're different.
I think one of my favorite memories is the first year that I took students to Dijon, and we made an outing to a small town where we met the mayor. And the mayor said, well, I'm going to show you where we're building a new police station. So he took us onto the site, and there was all this construction. He said, we had to stop construction because we came upon some ruins, and we had to call in the archaeologist. And what they found was a piece of the old Roman road. And so I said, okay, I had all my students jump into the pit and put their feet on the Roman road. But that's pretty typical of what happens in France. Is whenever you're digging or doing any kind of construction, if you come upon something that you think of is of historical value, you have to call in the experts. So I think that was a good experience for them to see too.
Mountains, we'd be walking along serpentine trails, switchbacks, and come around the side of the mountain. There'd be like 40 or 50 llamas and alpacas looking at us in their sort of queer way. They'd have those great big beautiful eyes and eyelashes, and they'd all turn at once and go and stay more or less motionless, staring at us like, what the hell are you doing on my mountain? And they're very shy, except for one who fell in love with me briefly.